Hello everyone. Today I want to talk to you about how Japan had to work really hard just to get the US to only add a 15% tariff on them. But the future looks pretty grim for Japanese companies. Also, Marcos Jr. played the sycophant to the US but got nothing in return. Trump doesn't even care if the Philippines improves its relationship with China. Philippine President Marcos Jr. is known for his anti-China stance. Recently, during his visit to the US, there was a video of Marcos Jr. meeting with Trump at the White House on July 22 that went viral online. At that time, a reporter asked Marcos Jr., since the Philippines will take over the rotating ASEAN chairmanship next year, how does he plan to balance relations between the US and China? Marcos Jr. replied, just as you said, we will assume the ASEAN chairmanship in 2026. In a sense, as you mentioned, I don't really need to balance our relations between China and the US, because our foreign policy is independent and self-reliant. Our main concern is to protect our territory and exercise our sovereignty. Now, whether we act alone or not, we still need to work together with our partners. Marcos Jr. emphasized that their strongest partner has always been the United States. He said that of course they are working to build alliances and multilateral relationships so that the Philippines, together with like-minded countries that share the same values and abide by international law, especially the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, can clearly state the Philippines' position to anyone who intends to unilaterally change the world order. These are the principles we base ourselves on. Marcos Jr.'s false arguments can be summed up in a few sentences like this. We don't need to balance between the US and China. Together with our ally the US or other like-minded countries, we stand against China. When Marcos Jr. thought his anti-China rhetoric would win Trump's praise, Trump interrupted him like this. I don't mind if the Philippines gets along well with China, because the US and China get along just fine too. The relationship between China and the US is very good. Although the material for black earth magnets is a bit complicated, the progress with China on black earth magnets is moving very quickly. They are shipping in record numbers. Trump got more and more excited as he spoke, saying, we get along very well with China. I don't mind President Marcos dealing with China. You know, that's because I think he has to do what's best for his country. I've always said, make the Philippines great again, do whatever you want to do. If you want to deal with China, I really don't mind at all. Trump's response left Marcos Jr. looking awkward, so all he could do was agree, saying, well, anyway, this is something we have to do. You could say Marcos Jr. has been playing the fool, polishing America's shoes and getting nothing in return. Trump didn't even mind the Philippines improving its relationship with China, and he kept slapping tariffs on the Philippines. As soon as Marcos Jr. left the White House, Trump posted on his own social media platform, Truth Social, saying, today I met with the visiting Philippine President Marcos at the White House, and the two sides reached a trade agreement. Trump said that the US would impose a 19-3 tariff on the Philippines, while the Philippines would open its market to the US and implement zero tariffs. Previously, the agreement between Indonesia and the US also had the US imposing a 19% tariff on Indonesia. So, the Philippines' pro-US stance didn't earn it any special favors. What's more, Trump immediately announced that the US had reached a trade agreement with Japan, lowering US tariffs on Japan to 15%. Hey, that's even lower than the 19% for the Philippines. The lesson from the Philippines story is that blindly siding with the US and going against China doesn't lead to any good outcome for other countries. Marcos Jr. came to power during Biden's era, cooperating with the US to stir up trouble in the South China Sea and contain China. Now that Trump is in office, everything is about putting American interests first. He doesn't care at all whether the Philippines cooperates with the US against China, he just wants to squeeze the Philippines for more money and raise tariffs. The Philippines even has to give the US zero tariffs, which will definitely deal a huge blow to their agriculture. By blindly following the US and being anti-China, what benefits does the Philippines actually get? Let's talk about Japan again. On July 22, Trump announced via social media that the US and Japan had reached an unprecedented, large-scale agreement on tariff measures. Trump said that under the terms of the agreement, the US would impose a 15% reciprocal tariff on Japan, and Japan would significantly open its markets in areas such as automobiles and agricultural products. Trump said in his post, "I just completed a large-scale agreement with Japan, perhaps the biggest deal ever. Under my direction, Japan will invest $55 billion in the United States, and America will receive 90% of the profits. This agreement will create hundreds of thousands of American jobs, something unprecedented." Trump emphasized that this agreement also includes a reciprocal tariff of 15-3, covering Japanese cars, trucks, rice, and other agricultural products, among others. He also said this is an exciting moment because we will continue to maintain consistently good relations with Japan. A senior official from the Japanese government, when interviewed by Japanese media, said that the content released by President Trump is basically accurate. The Japanese side also believes this is a welcome agreement, and that it is the result of persistent negotiations led by Economic Revitalization Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi. Since the beginning of 2005, tariff negotiations between the US and Japan have remained tense. In early April, the Trump administration announced the imposition of reciprocal tariffs on Japanese goods, including a 24.3% general goods tariff and a 25.3% automobile tariff, which triggered a strong backlash from Japan. The Japanese government repeatedly expressed deep regret over the actions taken by the United States and held urgent consultations, and now an agreement has finally been reached. To sum it up, first, Japan has indeed been holding out and engaging in tough negotiations with the United States. Japan originally thought that, as America's Asia-Pacific ally, it could be an exception to the tariffs, just like during Trump's previous term, but in the end, it failed. Although the 15.3% tariff is not as high as those imposed on other countries, it still deals a significant blow to Japanese industries. Second, Japan's automotive industry will take a heavy hit, as the 15.3% reciprocal tariff includes automobiles. Previously, when the US imposed a 25.3% tariff on all cars, including Japanese ones, Japanese media investigations found that Japanese car manufacturers reduced the prices of their exports to the US by more than 20%, meaning that the vast majority of the tariff was absorbed by the Japanese car makers themselves. Now, even if the tariff drops to 15%, it is expected that Japanese car manufacturers will still be the ones to bear the cost. Their profits will take a significant hit, which will lead to layoffs in Japan, and may even force them to move more factories to the US. It's going to be tough for Japanese companies to survive in the future. I'd also like to talk about how the tariffs imposed by the US on a small African country show just how selfish and self-serving America can be. Trump announced tariff rates on multiple countries. Lesotho, a country in southern Africa, is facing a heavy tax of 50%, making it one of the countries with the highest tariff rates, and this has already caused their factories to shut down. Local Taiwanese businesspeople have also been affected, closing their factories as well. This is the world's only country entirely above 1,000 meters in elevation, known as the Kingdom in the Sky, and it's a major global hub for denim production. Now, it has been hit hard by Trump's tariffs. At a local denim factory run by Taiwanese businesspeople, the gates are tightly shut, and no one comes to answer the door. Because the announcement of the 50% tariff caused panic among American buyers, many local businesses have already been forced to close. As a result, many people in Lesotho have lost their jobs. Reports say that every morning, large groups of women wearing wool hats and gloves wait outside the gates of this Taiwanese-owned garment factory, hoping that some of them might be called in for work. But in the end, the factory never opens its doors. A 54-year-old woman in Lesotho said helplessly on the street in the garment district that she had worked as a factory worker for decades, but now she's unemployed. At home, I survive just by drinking water. I simply can't go on living like this. Like many other local job seekers, they don't understand why the United States would impose such high tariffs on this extremely poor country. Lesotho was even called a country that nobody's ever heard of by Trump. At the time, Trump further stated that the main reason for imposing a 50% tariff on Lesotho was the trade imbalance between the two countries. Last year, Lesotho exported goods worth $2.4 million to the United States, most of which were garments. In contrast, the United States only exported $3 million worth of goods to Lesotho, and that made Trump angry. Lesotho used to benefit from the African Growth and Opportunity Act implemented by former U.S. President George W. Bush, which allowed most African countries to enter the U.S. market tariff-free. Thanks to this favorable policy, Lesotho has 30 large garment factories, 18 of which are run by Taiwanese businesses. At its peak, this created over 60,000 jobs and fulfilled global orders for major American companies like H&M and Walmart. When the US raises tariffs, China lowers them. China is doing the opposite. Starting this year, it has reduced tariffs on exports from most poor African countries, including Lesotho, to zero. So, in the eyes of countries in the global south, doesn't this create a stark contrast between China and the US?